at the chapters. I have access to the discussion on the live stream videos.
So you're okay?
So
What do you think, Lisa?
I'm okay. I just love your little toolkit of resources that you usually share with us. But if you
Well, you can always
if you
email
can
me and I'll send you
those
whatever
or
I
make
have.
pictures of them.
although I did miss 2 sessions, not just one. Does that?
No, it's okay. It's because they're the ones that canceled, so that's like a snow day, right?
Yeah.
Snow day in the middle of summer. Yeah, if you ever need anything, I will share. The only thing is like everything I do is a work in progress. I've been in my district for 10 years, and my ESL plan has changed every single year. I mean, I've never kept it the same, and so it's one of those things. Yeah, if you ever need anything or want anything, and sometimes if I don't do it, because we're a low incidence district, so I don't have access to some things that larger districts do, I usually know who does, and so I can usually contact people as well. You know who wants to share. There are, unfortunately, some people who don't like to share, but I like to share and I steal everything anyway, so it's not really mine. You can, if you have not paid for Ashland credit and you wanted to receive it, it's not too late. The projects, if you can get them to me, just some type of reflection, a lesson plan unit, PowerPoint of some sort, just turn it in within a couple weeks so I can post a grade. We already talked about class. We do have other TESOL PDs coming up. Right now, we already have registration set up for August 19th, and that is at the University of Findlay. That's our yearly conference there at the University of Findlay. We're focusing on mainstream teachers there. We have a session on second language acquisition and culture and that type of thing to try to get an introduction. We're going to have something on families because one of the Toledo districts wanted some type of family interaction, how to include families. And then we have a section on differentiation in the classroom, and then we'll have a panel of different teachers doing different things. So anyhow, that's the 19th. And then we have a couple going on in September. The last 4 are held here at Ashland. They're going to house them. All of these are on Saturdays because I can't take days off work. But I do think that they're needed topics. So we're doing the whole special ed spectrum is really difficult for a lot of people. So we're actually going to do 2. One is going to be September 9th, and one's going to be October 14th. On September 9th, it's going to be mostly just focusing on what is the difference between second language acquisition and how does that look versus someone with a disability. So it's kind of like trying to figure out what is the difference or how do the differences look, that type of thing. Whereas on October 14th, it's more of like the intervention process. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I know some schools use RTI, some use MTSS, but normally, even if they don't use those systems, they use some type of intervention approach as you're trying to figure those things out. So both are focused on that special education type of thing though.
What does MTSS do?
Multi-tiered system? I don't know what it stands for.
Okay.
It starts with multi-tiered.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Multi-tiered strategic salad. Salad would be good.
Well, I think when they're doing it, they want to make sure it's the framework. And I think RTI became even though RTI is a framework too, I think it became more of a process. Mm-hmm. So the MTSS took it back and they're like, it's a framework. But RTI itself is a framework too. But it does use, there's actually, there's 3 or 4 different ways. Catherine Collier, who is the ESL special ed guru, she came up with a PRISM way of looking at it. Oh. And then there's another system, Cal themselves came up with a system. I just attended their 2-day workshop this week, got back last night. Well, fun. And I ended up with exercise-induced vasculitis.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that nice? I walked around DC, got 30,000 steps in though. So that was good. But I had one day, so after workshop at 3:30, we get back till midnight. We walked around DC the whole time. Fun. But anyhow, but yeah, Cal came up with their own system as well, and they have like a 4-tiered approach type of thing. Basically, the way I looked at it though, their level 1 and level 2 is really just level 1, but recognizing that the classroom teachers really aren't doing enough, so they made it look like 2, so that they can really separate those out. That's
sneaky.
Excuse me, Jessica,
yes.
Where's the registration for this?
The one for the back to school workshop, if you did not receive it through Ohio TESOL, email me and I'll send you the link. The rest of them I have not put up yet because I was waiting to get approved by Ashland. for the credit. And so they just approved me, so I will be putting those up soon. The 23rd is a slide workshop. Brenda Custodio, who wrote the book, will be doing that one. And I think I've ordered 20 books, so the first 20 people who show up that day will get one of her books. But yes, so she's going to do a whole day workshop on that because that's a needed topic as well. And then on November 11th, we're going to do one on teaching reading, just specifically reading, focus on academic vocabulary, a focus on what's different about teaching reading to struggling learners versus struggling English learners. And so those are the topics.
Interrupted formal education.
That gets that right.
What's that?
Okay, so MTSS is
Did you look it up?
multi-tiered system of support.
System of support. There you go.
Multi-tiered system of.
That's
I like
I only
strategic support.
our school district is starting to use that one, and so that's the first time I had heard of it was when they were using it. But so I thought I would throw it in there. But it really, when I'm gonna name it, I'm gonna try to name it so it's not RTI or not MTSS because I think no matter what you're doing, every district is doing something to try to figure out is it a disability or not. And so I'm hoping that we can catch everybody regardless of what type of intervention that they use for that. But yeah, so I will be sending everything through the TESOL listserv as soon as I get it, as soon as I get it done. Yeah. This is our fall workshop. We will be offering another set in the springtime. I don't like driving in the winter, so it probably will not be until maybe like February before we'll start eating like that. But I'm just trying to do it by semester too. That way we can get the credits. So the people who want credits, we're offering 5 workshops. You can actually get 2 credits if you attend 4 of the 5. So for the people who need credits. Okay. And that is it. And then I'm gonna sit and go.
All right. So, probably one of my most challenging topics, I think, in my own head is assessing. So, the first thing that I kind of jotted down was on the bottom of 135. Of course, we all know what assessment is, you know, formal, informal, formative, summative, blah, blah, blah. But it says some schools have predetermined ways of deciding what criteria are used to give students grades. This is the case, teachers will, of course, want to follow their school's guidelines. If the school does not set criteria for determining grades, the teacher will want to consider how much weight to give to objective measures such as testing, quiz, road. So I wrote off to the side, do your schools have predetermined things for grades? I don't, or Dublin does, or at least no one told me they did. If we do.
ELL students specifically?
I think for all over, like, you know, I know there was we use the DRA, Developmental Reading Assessment 2, which I learned at a conference. They actually have an app where you can do all the running record online or in this app. Because I went up and I was like, when are you going to stop making us make so many copies? No, we have an app. Oh, great. So a lot of elementary teachers would look at their DRA level, and if it fell into this category, they'd give them this grade. If it fell in, and I'm like, you can't use one determiner, in my opinion, to give a student a grade. But in the middle school, we really don't. Like, we kind of look at how much we're going to weight different categories of grades. You know, is it a summative or formative? You know, we call it different things. We do, but do your districts and schools give you guidelines that you have to follow for grading?
We give progress reports.
Sure.
Unless, I think, perhaps the high schools might. Those TESOL specialists could be a teacher of record, but for like middle, intermediate, elementary, we are not teachers of record.
Right.
So our progress reports are based upon that whole the ELP standards.
Yes. And is it like a scale of 1 to 4, or do you put a check mark if they've accomplished that?
Hold that up.
I will.
I'm pulling out.
Holding it. Does anybody else want to throw in something?
Columbus, we have specific yellow report cards. 1 through 4, and then for the grade, but then they always say the effort grade too is the important part.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, they're based on the old ELO standards. Yes,
It is just a check.
Is it?
For each 9 weeks.
whether
Um,
they've met a certain requirement.
Correct. Well, we can put in 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're right.
Okay.
And so, for example, under understanding, understands when listening to information, understands what he or she reads. Participation, can participate in conversations, can participate in written exchanges of information. So they're either at the beginning, they're making some progress with support, they're meeting expectations with minimal support, or they have made progress and they're working.
Mhm. That's kind of how our elementary one is set up.
I like those. Those seem very applicable to what the students are actually doing in class. I mean, then they're kind of straightforward instead of can infer. They can infer because when I raise my voice, they know that I'm unhappy.
Right.
Infer,
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's just like when we had to do the K2 inventories. Like a lot of that for Otella, like a lot of that is, yeah, maybe. Like, and that was a lot of pressure. I didn't like that. So I'm glad it's a test now. I mean, you know, but what do you guys do?
We have progress reports. We just started them, but they're not very parent friendly.
Yeah.
Parents get it and they're like, because we have like all the standards listed right now, basically. We kind of like circle or highlight where the kid is in each board domain.
Okay.
So it's a work in progress. I don't think I like it yet.
Yeah.
Something
So when did you guys start using it?
just last year.
So before that, you didn't have anything?
Is that right?
And
We
we
would-
don't have any.
Yeah.
Is that right? No, do I remember correctly, you're in a charter school?
I'm in a charter school. Sullivan, well, depending who you ask, it's either Sullivan Avenue Community School or Imagine Academy at
Okay.
Sullivan.
Okey dokes. Okay. So you guys
Got
don't
two
have
years.
one?
No, although
Do you get
I can,
something?
I can start one if I want to. But I'm kind of like the title person only for the English learners. I'm
Gotcha.
kind of divorced from what goes on in the classroom, which
Yeah.
I don't like and
Mhm.
hope to change, but we'll see.
Yeah.
If you don't have, my advice, don't start one.
Don't start a progress
Don't start a
report.
progress report.
I used to have my own years ago.
I don't know. I guess I'm old school. I still consider ESL like more of a support to the classroom. So giving us their own grade, I don't know, sometimes I just have issues with it. But I guess they need to know, parents, it's good to inform them where they're going on the domains.
Mhm.
But sometimes I feel like we're scoring these things and they're beginner, it's just showing the parents more that the student is different or behind, lower than the other students. And it's not.
And how do other schools handle grades for their other subjects?
Yeah.
Because we had a third grader who is a fairly recent arrival in the country and got, I think, mostly ones on a report card because she can't do the standards. A big part of the reason she can't do the standards is that she doesn't speak much English
Yeah.
or read or write much English. She's making good progress, but her mother was very upset. And we had to explain, this is comparing her to native speakers. It says nothing about her intelligence.
Right.
her teacher thinks she's learning and doing a good job, it'll get better. But is there a better system that you guys are using?
Intermediate, we have pass or fail. And then we also, like for our newcomers, we just have a simple, on the teacher for 5 quarters, we just say, these are their strengths that we've noticed this quarter, these are things we're working on. That's it.
They don't get a report card,
Well, not from me.
not from you, but from the
From
classroom teachers.
I know,
Do they
in
still have-
intermediate, they have pass or fail,
Okay.
but I honestly don't know. I think they're probably giving ones, but.
I think at that point, the comments, hopefully they have a
Yes.
section for comments are the
Yes.
most important part
Yes,
to
that's what I was
explain
gonna
to the parent.
And then we just give them translated. Do you have some?
We do. Most of our ELs are Spanish speaking. We have wonderful bilingual office staff that translate everything.
I think that's all.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does live in the comments. You know, when you're in a pickle and you have to take the same kid every day out of social studies, so they're not getting that instruction. They would always get an NA or whatever, or they left it blank, and then they're in the comment would be, you know, this student is, you know, at ELL during this time, they're receiving some support in social studies, but due to limited English, you know. But I think grading as a whole, and I won't get into it because you could debate a whole bunch of stuff, but I think our kids, every kid is overgraded and over-tested and over-analyzed and whatever. But, you know, it's interesting as I'm sitting here thinking, in the middle school, when I push into classes, I don't give progress reports. We don't have them. And I really I don't give any kind of information. I go to the conferences. And if there was something, of course, pressing that I felt like I needed to share with the family, I would do that. But sometimes I write up little blurbs, but it's kind of like, Michelle, when you were like, I wouldn't do those progress reports because once you do it, you got to keep doing it. And then, you know, then you have that Catholic guilt that, oh gosh, I forgot this month, or, you know, whatever.
Seriously.
It's gonna take my whole life. Okay. Anybody else want to add to that?
I think parent involvement or some sort of communication is important. We had even thought of doing like where the kid will write to their parents to how they're doing, or just teacher notes or something home. Because I feel like my parents ask me a lot, like, how's my kid doing? And it'd be nice just to have something formal, but we don't have anything yet that I'm like in love with, as you know, systematic markdown stuff. But at least notes or something, some sort of communication is good.
It'd be nice to be able to sit in a big room and see everybody's progress reports and go, oh, I really like how they did this, and you know,
Yeah.
and then to be able to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why don't we all have the same sort of thing? I know we don't all want to be the same, but and our kids are different. I get it. But you know, it'd be nice to see how other people do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and to be able to pick and choose. Well, we all take VOL, but it's all the same.
Mhm.
And we're all using the same standards, so it could be the same.
Is there, like a Google Doc for the, I'm sorry, for the TESOL? Listserv?
I don't know.
That might be something.
Yeah. I wrote it down. Like a drive folder or something we could throw things in.
Yeah, but we could add and file from.
To give my school credit, I think we do a good job getting parents in for conferences. And so they're getting a lot of this verbally from the
Yeah.
teachers.
You know, as long as, I think the most important part is that you are communicating. So they're aware of how their child is.
Yeah, and I don't think communication doesn't always need to be formal and look like a report card or a project. You know what I mean? I think a conversation is, you know, it speaks louder sometimes than a report I can't read because we use big words. So I chaperoned a camp, a church camp with my daughter, 5th and 6th graders, for a week. It was great fun. We did archery, which I love, right? And so they were all making fun of me because I put my elbow up too high, but what else? They're like, do the Melissa. And I was like, and so I had this huge bruise on my arm for a while and I didn't roll my elbow in, you know what I'm saying? And the tip of my middle finger was completely numb. So now I have feeling on this side, but this side is still numb. So it's like really weird to write or to like do anything. So sorry, it's taking me a little longer. Right? I don't know when it's going to come back. My daughter told me I should go see a doctor. I'm like, I'm fine.
Well, so I'm really enjoying the conversation. But you know, I was thinking like about the all ones. That is very disheartening. But then it got me thinking, perhaps the problem still, or the control, I won't say the problem. Perhaps what we need to be rethinking is how we're assessing the content. Because really, if a student, okay, so I'm gonna borrow your words, we're supposed to be supporting, okay, content and bridging that gap between the language. Well, if the skill was, students will be able to construct a map with a compass rose and include at least 3 landforms on that, okay? There's no reason to get a 1 in that, not with the support of with the ESL teacher. So perhaps the problem is, how is it assessed? Now, maybe that student couldn't just take a test on a worksheet like that, all written in English, But if you redesign the assessment, then you can really understand if the student really did get that content. I know that that will take planning and intentionality, but what else are we there for? What's our job?
Right.
So maybe like, no, if the standard was write the 10-page paragraph, I mean 10-page paragraph.
Yeah, that would
10,
be a long
you know,
paragraph.
yeah, that is a really long paragraph.
Good.
That's a very good paragraph. But you know, a 10 sentence paragraph, okay. Maybe that might end up being a 1. However, maybe something like the student can record their thoughts in a memoir fashion. Why couldn't they write that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe we should rethink, like, when we're all are given all 1s, have we done our best to differentiate that assessment? Have we stepped in enough? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, I just got finished teaching summer school, and we had this little girl that every single one of her math problems was off by 1. Every last one of them. Every, I don't know, 10 minus 8 is always going to be 3. Okay. So I saw a pattern repeatedly. So I thought, what is happening here? So then I pulled in someone who speaks Somali, and I said, I have a hunch. Can you test my hunch? I have a feeling there's just a few numbers that she just literally is skipping over in English, and that's what's hurting her. It was 12, 15, and 17. She had something against those numbers, whatever. So we had her count in her native language, because if she couldn't do it in her native language, then I know she just really had trouble counting. She went all the way to the moon. She was rolling. We had to cut her off. She was just rolling, okay? She could cross over decades. She could count backwards in her native language. Okay, great. So now we tried in English, and for whatever reason, she just was forgetting what came after 11, what came after 14, etc. So I intervened on that for a day, maybe 2 days. Bam, now she's getting 100%. But she would have received a 1. Do you know what I mean? And we just changed it. I don't know what I'm really trying to say, except if we're really assessing the content, not that, maybe we could rethink how how we're doing it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would say I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's
But
just
I
something to
can
think
just
about.
See the classroom teachers saying, that's true, they can show you that, but they can't do it on fourth grade level or fifth grade level, so.
I know, but I'm saying the fourth grade content. So say first graders third graders would have to do if the standard was can create a map with 3 landforms, and the only thing that was holding them back was they couldn't get past the worksheet directions
Oh, gotcha.
but they actually did know plains, mountains.
They could do it, once you explained the directions to them, they were able to.
Right.
do it. No, absolutely.
I don't know, I was just thinking, like, could we drill down and find out, do they really understand it? They just are forgetting word mountain, or they're not being able to access the word.
So I've had this conversation with people, with mainstream teachers, and I'm like, why do we always have to give them a test on Schoology? Why can't why can't you just sit in front of them and ask them the questions? Or why does it always need to be a 5-paragraph essay? What if they got the same information out on a poster board or whatever,
Right.
But I think some people are very, this is the way we do it, this is the way I have to do it mentality, and it's hard to break that. But I mean, just even in the book on 137, that the slew of different assessments right there. Like, I had a student who didn't really like to talk orally. So I would start a Google Doc with them and I would ask him questions and he would answer me back and answer, and we'd go back and forth and back and forth. Now, I understand I wasn't listening to him speaking, but we were having a conversation and I knew he understood what I was saying or writing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial that we look at different ways to assess. Not everybody learns the same way, so why are we all testing them the same way? If that student could show you with little bears that she could do it, what's it matter? I still count on my fingers. I may not make it look like I am, but you know what I mean? Like,
you'll be happy to know the latest research shows that you're supposed to count.
Yeah.
So there you go.
But it's interesting. Do you ever notice your kids, like, I have kids that used to count like here, or like they touch their faces. And, it's so interesting. Anyway, but yeah, we really need to look at what is the goal? Is the goal that we want them to know the 50 states? Okay, so why couldn't they have a big map in front of them? Or maybe it's on your playground, a big map, and you go, where's California? And they jump on it. Okay, they know. So, yeah, it does take time.
And
But
maybe it won't be a 4, because
Right,
obviously a multiple choice problem is a little
Right,
different than an open-ended. You know what I mean? Name the 6th president of the United States. Okay, might not be able to do it off the top of my head. But if you gave me 3 or 4 choices, I can eliminate George Washington and President Obama.
Right.
So now I'm down to 50% chance of getting it right. I understand that might skew the validity, but I would go from a 1 to at least a 2.
Which is a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm on my way because I eliminated that. I don't know.
But could we have like a little asterisk that said with differentiation or with teacher support? Only because when they have to take standardized tests, they wouldn't have a scribe or reader.
Well, some would, right? They would have a red tone on in their native language.
If they're brand if they're,
Right.
yeah.
But I also think that
But those are probably mostly your ones, I'm hoping, but I don't know. It could be more.
Well, I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
that
but
is
you
the
look
goal,
for the report card's sake, it
definitely.
could show something. Maybe not a 4, but I don't know. I'm just thinking, are we really assessing content? Or do we kind of give up?
Or are we testing?
Yeah, do we kind of give up sometimes and go, well, he barely speaks English. He probably doesn't know. And meanwhile, because we had a student from Brazil that flew through the math. And, but that teacher was really good at making sure she was drilling down. Now, word problems, of course, being the language barrier, but taught him some ways to get around some things and try to figure it out. And he really showed he knew the content. Language arts, it wasn't a 4 on the report card, but I don't know, it's just.
I think though, if the standard is, I need to know the 50 states and the capitals, it doesn't say I need to know the 50 states and capitals by taking a big pencil test. So I would say if there's a map and they're jumping, or they're taking the California word and they're putting it on top of the state or whatever, I think they're still getting the work done. I don't think the way you get there should matter. I mean, I think,
because the job of the teacher is to teach the content.
yeah,
And that's what should, because the state testing is totally different. I think sometimes with state testing, we look at that so much, but when it comes to actually in the classroom and what you're doing in there, the state testing should reflect that, but unfortunately it is what it is. But yeah, you're supposed to be teaching the student and assessing what the student knows. Well, if you give them a paper pencil test and they don't get anything right, but yet they know it, you didn't really test what they know.
right.
So you really do need to make sure you have some type of assessment that's reflecting it. But I think it's hard if you don't have the buy-in. Like you said, with one teacher who's willing to do it, because ESL teachers are being asked to do a million different jobs in the district.
Yep.
And I know in my district, if I'm the one doing it, teachers will listen to me. What do you want to do? Okay, if you do it, so if I do the scaffolding, if I tell them, well, they're only going to have to know if they have 50 states, if they're a newcomer, I may only have them find 10 places. Is it as rigorous? It's still rigorous because they don't know any of them. They've never been in the States before. And so it doesn't matter. So it's one of those, but if I'm the one telling the teacher, they'll accept it. However, if that teacher had to do it on their own, I don't think that they would do it.
And that's probably still gonna be a 1, to your point. If the standard was 50 states and
Right.
you only do 10, it's still a 1 because that's a limited amount. We're happy for you, we'll celebrate you, but that might still be a 1. But if we can do 41 states, we're up to a 3 or whatever the case may be.
Because our report cards are a little different, though we don't do the numbers, but I think for us, if they're really not working close to level, they get an SU. In our school district. Satisfactory, unsatisfactory. So if they're not, so they'll get an S or a U, but most of our students, because even with students with disabilities, there's accommodations. And your accommodations are required, and it's considered that if they're doing that, then that's what they need to do, and that should be reflected. Because even with students with disabilities, that's something that I think we should call under those lines a lot with our accommodations. And so you do need to provide accommodations, and it is required. And so I don't know how that on a standard basis, because ours is not standard.
So when we talk about SU, in Dillon, so letter grades don't start till 4th grade. Yes. So if they're not, so 4th through 12th, we're talking. So if they're not able to meet the standard of whatever grade it is, they could be SU. If they cannot accomplish a C- or better on their own. So say you're getting a D.
That's kind of how it is, yeah.
If you're getting a D, then you can either get
Then-
S or U.
Right.
And what's your letter for exceeds the standard?
We're not a standards-based grade card right now.
No, the SU, what's the thing above the S?
If they're actually exceeding it, then they get the letter grade. They would, we only get, like, to be honest with you, in our district, I don't use it very often, very rarely, because most of our teachers accommodate. And so if they're accommodating, then I don't have to worry about it, but every once in a while, we'll have to fill out the SU. Usually it's our level 1s,
Okay.
and it's usually middle school and high school. And a couple times that we've had to do it, yeah, and sometimes they'll use it in some classes and not others. Like a student I had last year, I think for, which was odd, because social studies is almost always one that I can give them a grade. The last year, the social studies teacher was not working with my ESL teacher, and so we had to do an SU for that class, but yet he got grades in math, he had an SU for language, and he got grades in science. So it's not all the grades were SU, so he could get some grades and then some SUs.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So in Dublin, you said if it's at a D minus, then they use SU.
Right.
Started at D minus, what qualifies as an S? I mean,
I don't know. I think I've only suggested U's to a couple kids because they just weren't doing anything.
Okay.
So I mean, I know a D minus isn't satisfactory, but it is.
Well, is it performance-based or progress-based? Because I can
Ours
see
is
like
progress.
for 10 states
Yes.
example,
Yeah.
they've made progress.
Yeah, ours is definitely
Yeah.
progress, and if they're not showing progress, they get a U. And we haven't given out many U's, but we have had to give them out. But I'll also be honest with you, most of it's not the student, it's the teacher.
Yeah.
It's because the teacher's not doing what they need to do, and that's not fair to the student. But unfortunately, with the students with disabilities, there's a lot more legal stuff and a lot more school support.
Yeah.
But with ESL, there's not so much, and so you have to make do with what you have, and so it's unfortunate. But that's why. But yeah, they have to be showing progress. And usually I'll make they have a portfolio, or they'll have to show me what they're working on. So they do have to show it. But if they don't, if they're sitting doing nothing, and it's not because, like, if we've given them the scaffolded work and they're choosing not to do it, and I can't figure out why, like maybe there's another motive or whatever that we need to think about, then they would. And I have given those out.
And to Lisa's point about the standardized testing versus report card, I think I agree with you. There's a huge disconnect. We've had, parents will say, hey, he's making all A's, and then you tell me on this test, this is where he scored. I don't know how to repair that
And
because
that's in years.
you can't teach the test. You don't know what's on the test. I mean, you can teach good test taking strategies. You can hope you fill in a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously in science and social studies, you can hope you've taught all the vocab, but you might have missed something, or you might not have stayed, you know what I mean? I don't know.
it kind of seems like if it's that big of a discrepancy, then there's a big, like you said, a big disconnect. I would think if they're getting A's, they didn't quite pass it, but they were close to it. I mean, if they're getting A's and they're like really low on it, I would think that a little bit grade inflation or something.
But it's also, they may not get the accommodations for the state testing, because the ELA, you get none. So I have students who are getting A's and B's in language arts, but are not passing that test.
Yeah.
But the parents are aware that they're getting accommodations in the classroom, and that's why they're passing the classes. And that's why they may not pass that ELA test, because they do get those accommodations in the classroom to show proficiency.
So that's what you
But
were saying.
statewide, I will tell you, our students who have been in our programs and have exited or who've gotten forced, they're passing the state test on the average. So we actually have, that's for that, it's just those level 1s and 2s are not gonna be passing, but when they get to level 4 or 5, or when they're exiting, they're gonna be fine. At least that's the state average for the majority of the students, so.
So then, is it beneficial for the child to get these accommodations and get A's and B's in class? If that's
Hopefully the accommodations are helping them to learn.
I think so.
Because,
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Helping them to learn, which is the goal. We
Yeah,
want them
that's
to
what we
learn,
want.
but then we get to the report card and they get these A's and these B's. I guess it's just hard with the whole. They're learning and they're progressing, but is that an A level work? And I guess there's so much,
I
on
think if you're
learning
doing
and
grades, I
things.
think that's the way it has to be. If you're doing a standards-based report card, I think it would be perfectly fine to say, no, they're not a test
Yeah.
student. But if you're doing a letter-based report card, you would almost have to provide those accommodations because it's not fair to that child.
Right.
But with a standards-based report card, I think they don't know their numbers, they don't know their numbers. They don't know how to add, they don't know how to add.
It's more black and white.
Yeah, I think so, but
Okay,
with
that's
letter-based,
what I'm so used to thinking
Yeah.
about the standards-based report card, not the, that makes sense.
yeah, because I think with standards, and if they, they don't know. However, I do go back to, do they really know it or not? And so that makes a difference, because if you can ask them in Somali about, the different countries or whatever, the history or whatever, they can actually tell you that they know the knowledge, they just didn't know it in English.
Right.
But I actually think they should still get it on the standard-based report card. And if they could do a story problem in another language, like we offer our math in Spanish, we have Spanish books. And so if they can do it in Spanish, then they get credit for it. I mean, that's just something that they know. So even though it's not in English, they still get that accommodation. And so they should still be able to get the credit for knowing material, because that's a content-based, not a language. But in the ELA sector, they still don't know some of the information.
So, I don't think I mentioned it here before, but, so I said earlier we get the DRA. And so there was a little pilot that some teachers did where the student would read the book, and then the bilingual aide would ask them the questions. So like maybe they were asked in Japanese. And if the student responded, but we're not allowed to use that score
Oh, wow.
because we were told they had to do it all in English. And I'm like, but they've read the book in English.
Yeah, they have to read it in
If
English.
they're able to answer those questions in Japanese, they know the story.
Right.
So how, and when I asked, or I said something to the DRA people, Pearson, at this conference I went to, it shouldn't be that way. But,
They
you
said they
know.
agreed that you should be able to do it,
correct.
because it's still valid, because
Yeah,
They
I mean,
understood- they read it in English. and they
they're not
understood.
giving them the answers, it's just read this question to them. Okay, what did they say? And then I write the answer, right, in English, of course, but, yeah, I mean, I think it should be allowed. Anyway.
ours can answer in Spanish. Most of our students are Spanish speakers. So. And they still get that credit.
I don't know if this is a good time to ask, but on page 137, which I think Melissa just referred to, in the table, under formative assessment features, I didn't know if I totally agree with the third bullet. So maybe somebody could explain it better, but they're saying that all formative is subjective. I've made objective formative assessments before. So I didn't know. I'm sorry, Mrs. Linsky and Mrs.
I think comparatively, there's probably more formative, because I would think some summative could be. Because you're still in the writing part, you're still using a rubric.
Right.
So I mean, so I think some summative, even though it says objective for the most part, and you're using a rubric, I mean, we had the same rubric, it takes a long time for us to get aligned.
Yeah.
But I would say that on the stereotype of formative would be more subjective. So I'd have to agree with like the stereotype, but I think that you could have formative tests that are objective. But I think that there are some that are subjective.
Yeah, even like just looking at the examples, like anecdotal notes, you know. It's subjective things are hard. I even think the DRA is subjective.
It can be.
Because, you know, if I'm used to listening to Michelle speak with an accent and I give her test, I could give her one score, but
Somebody else would give it to.
yeah, Jessica listens and she's like, oh, she didn't say dog, she said something else, you know? But subjective things I think are hard.
And even with writing in general, what you're looking for, I think that's why the rubrics are, because you're looking at specific details. But even then, like what's important, like what I know the kid knows and what you know the kid knows.
Right.
You know, so it is, because if they're in my classroom, I know what mistakes they're making on a daily basis. And if they try to spell this one word, I'd be like, oh, I'm so proud of them. Whereas with another kid, I'd be like, why'd you spell it wrong?
Yeah, right.
You know, so it just depends. So I think it can be subjective.
Well, I see how they put spelling test on both. Now, maybe if you're saying I'll count the F and the PH, because I just want to know if they can spell phonetically, maybe,
I don't know
but
how that can be
spelling by its very nature should, I don't know, I don't know. That was the only, I kind of read that and I was like,
How would a spelling test be subjective?
right,
I'm
that's the
sure
only
there
thing I
is-
could think
I'm
of.
sure
is
that
it
she
could be
has
phonetic.
a way of thinking about it, but I know like when we do our testing,
That's not an exam, like vacuum.
maybe it's
I thought it was someone's car alarm. Oh, I thought it was a vacuum cleaner.
She thought it was the tornado session.
vacuum,
Is this the first Wednesday of the month?
yeah.
Yeah, but it's not new.
But it's not noon. Is it go up? No, it's 6:30.
I didn't see anything when I walked in.
It's off now, so I think it's.
For the air conditioning.
I don't see how much.
Yeah, we're listening to it. But I think it could be both. I mean, I think you could make an objective, vocabulary test.
Yes.
But at the same time, I think there are ways that you can make it. I think it's just the stereotype that there could be like portfolios. What's included in a portfolio is very subjective. Or what's being important in dialogue journals, what you're looking for. Even with dictation, I guess you give points for different things. Because that, to me, that would be kind of an objective test too.
Which one did you say?
Dictation. Because when you're dictating it to the right or wrong, right?
Do you
Yeah.
guys ever do that?
That's what I put.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned dictation on 149, I even wrote next to it. When would you use dictation?
I know.
See, so
we use it for
Hearing and
assessment.
recording sounds and words.
Yeah, we use it for assessment purposes.
Okay.
But they're just saying a word.
Not in
No,
hearing
it's
and
a
recording
sorry.
sounds and
What is
words,
that?
they say a sentence and they write down one.
Oh, is that an
Here.
assessment, hearing and,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's saying
Oh.
hearing,
Got
it's
ya.
a formal hearing. Oh, okay.
We call it sentence dictation. I guess it even has the word in it. Oh my gosh.
But when she explained it, she said that they read.
She went on a lot about it, didn't she? Because I don't think it's,
She
I don't think
did.
it's like the best thing. I do use it because I think that it's a quick way of knowing, do they know certain sounds? And so I can watch it, to see if they picked them up. But it's not something, the way she went on about it was like a positive, like the best thing that usually, because she wrote quite a bit about it.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, like read them.
I think it's good for drawing attention to features of language. I've used it with
Oh.
adult pronunciation students
Okay.
because the way the end of words in English
Mm.
kind of slur into the beginning of the next word.
Mm-hmm.
This was in China where they haven't heard a lot of English, and so this was very eye-opening to them. And I would introduce it by doing a dictation
Mm.
and kind of showing them, this is what you're not hearing. Here's this feature of English that you need to be aware of. That was very effective for that, I think.
Formative because it's one of those that forms what you're gonna teach, what phonetics
Yeah,
you're gonna use, what are you gonna teach in writing. Because even like as they get better, like you could actually do even multiple sentences to see if they know what punctuation is.
Right.
But it wouldn't be something I would hope that you would actually, it's more like
Yeah.
a formative type, of like what do they know, what do they still need
Yeah,
to learn?
but you could find out, are they realizing that there's a plural S or a past
Right.
tense on the end of words?
Right.
That would help. Yeah.
It's not commonly used, but I think you can get a lot of information from it. Now, the way she describes it, reading a whole thing, and then I don't think I've seen that used very often at all.
And then when she goes on in the last paragraph to talk about how it can be differentiated, that newcomers might be given a page with the passage written and several key words or phrases to be filled in. Well, then doesn't that become a closed task instead of dictation?
Yeah, it does both.
I guess now we don't use dictation as much possibly
I think
because
it's
it's not higher level.
If you have like a level 2 student who's still making a lot of errors and you want to test their hearing, I mean, because it's one of those things where sometimes I'll do that, I'll make sure I do something like that before I refer them again to the hearing person to check to see if they need hearing aid or hearing issue. Because if they're like, there's a certain point, I mean, level 1, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. By the time they get to level 2, their pronunciation is getting better. They still have an accent, maybe they still have some errors. And there's still some sounds that hey, they're from this language, they're going to make these sounds. But then there's other sounds you're like, why are they still making, why are they pronouncing the words this way when they're reading or when they're just speaking? And so the writing dictation, I think, helps to know, okay, what are they hearing? Are they hearing the sound? And sometimes they're hearing it even though they're pronouncing it wrong. So they may be hearing it exactly correctly, writing it down, even though they speak, they're not saying.
It's just not coming out.
I can't say I use it a lot, but we do use it for testing. I don't consider it more of a writing for me. I guess you're checking spelling and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I did like the, on 140 where they talked about reviewing together some samples of exemplary proficient in developing writing samples will help students to understand. Obviously that's good. So they can see it instead of you just talking about it. You know, and I use rubrics a lot. And I think the more specific sometimes they are, the better they are, just for me. But then again, writing really specific rubrics is very laborious.
Even when I think that I've gotten a good rubric, I'm so proud of my rubric, it's perfect. Then you go to grade something with
Yes.
it, or then you have a couple, because you usually have 2 or 3 people grading stuff, and you're like, what do you mean by this? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
is this or this? And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And you tweak it.
Well, I will say that on the state of Ohio writing assessment, don't ask me what grades, either first or second grade. Like on the rubric, it says they have to have these words spelled correctly. The, at, like there is no subject like, oh, well, nope, they missed cat. It says they must have all or one, it cannot be more than one error. Like it's, that one is a well designed rubric for that. It's it's the, I want to say second grade. It's the King's Ring or something. But it's the diagnostic that's on the website or
They
whatever.
have to write the sentences.
They have to write the sentence.
have to teach
And when you
Dictation.
score, yeah, it's a dictation.
Oh.
It is, it's an oral dictation.
I don't think
And it specifically says they have to have this different.
Required. But I don't know if it's required for all districts, or mine's a low performing district, so that's why we do it, but I don't know if it's required for all. Sometimes we do things from the state because. And so sometimes it may not be required, but I thought it's required because it's diagnostic statement. And I don't
know if it's required. I know it's not necessarily like a secure document. because
No,
you
it's
can
not
just get on the
online.
website and print it off.
Oh, really?
So I don't think it's.
To the kids. K through 2. Is that mixed or either K through 2 or K
When we're talking about the 140, she's listed the things about it. You said reviewing the different writings in the rubric. And she said this several times throughout the chapter. And I liked how she kept saying, these things need to be explicitly explained
Yes.
to them. Tell them,
Where's that at?
I have it underlined on 140 about this explicit explanation of expectations is especially helpful for ELLs.
Oh, it's already.
Because it's
underlined.
telling them,
Sorry.
it's telling them they spend their cognitive resources, but she talks about this whole book about.
About just being very explicit. Don't think, oh, they'll just get this, the whole thing. But now, I used to be more, oh, they'll learn it implicitly, but you just have to say, this is what it is, so they understand. Like she says, they realize, oh, this is important.
Yeah.
And I also like the way she keeps focusing on the cognitive, spending time on cognitive resources that allows them to do other things, because I don't know if I really explained it to teachers why they have to do it this way, or why things, and I think that, you know what, because they're spending all their time doing this, this, and this, that they're not focusing on this. And I think the way that she keeps reiterating that, it makes it easy to explain. Okay, now I know, okay, this is how I will explain when they ask, why, why do they have to do that, or why is this difficult?
This was a good chapter.
Yeah, it was. It had a lot of meat in it.
It took a long time to get through this.
Yeah.
I didn't know what ordering was. I never heard it called that. It's on 149 ordering. I think I just always made a model word for it. Unscramble,
Oh,
put it together. I don't know if I've ever heard
Mix
it
and
called.
fix.
But yes, now I use the
Mix and
professional
fix, I
word.
like that, mix it and mix it, mix it, mix it.
Boys and girls said we're going to order your sentences. Is that mix and fix?
this looks that.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
But you know, I don't think I've seen a lot where they do fragments. Usually I see it in words.
I do
Words,
Yeah.
yeah. But maybe because I don't use it with older kids, I tend to use it with more of the younger ones or the ones that are beginning with writing. But when she uses the word fragments there, it's
It could be just like,
chunks, it's like chunks.
what is it, the subject, the
Okay.
predicate, the different prepositional phrases,
That's what I
how
was
you can
thinking.
put them.
Like between the door, that could be a fragment.
You know, you could with older kids as they're learning, because if you keep it as a chunk, then they won't separate it.
Yeah.
And so you keep it as a chunk. Yeah, I've always done it with them, so word by word.
Even for young kids, just learning how the sentence order, you could just do subject and predicate and have them practice. And then throw in the prepositional phrases and where is it okay for certain prepositional phrases? It's okay for them to go at the beginning, but certain ones they have to go right after.
I thought it was interesting too on 148. Well, it starts on 147 about spelling. That, instead of doing it traditionally, the students could show students a picture that illustrates the meaning of the word and have them write it. So I think that shows a different level of understanding of the word, obviously. And then, or you could give them a multiple choice test with various spellings and they have to pick the correct one.
I did that this past year with my 5th grade students. The classroom teacher did it and then I modified the spelling list. And part of it would be circle the correctly spelled word. It was really hard for them. I would think, oh, that'd be easier instead of just memorizing it and spelling it the correct way. If you've studied it, you would, but it was interesting that it was very challenging for them to pick the correct spelling.
I always think that's funny because on some of the kindergarten and first grade pre-reading type of things, they have the word here, and then they can just, all they have to do is circle the word that looks like this word, and they still get it wrong. Because it is harder than you think it is, because I was looking at it thinking, well, this will be easy for them, because you just look at it, and it's not like it's words like B-O and D-O, or, letters that they will flip back. They can be totally different letters, and they'll still mix the words.
That's one of the things you need to teach them explicitly. Okay, you have to look at this first letter and then find the one that matches the second letter. Like you said, that you think that would be easy, but some.
But I know like a lot of the pre-reading assessments have those on it. Sometimes there'll be a picture also. So
Yeah.
before the letters, there's pictures. And I'm thinking, you circle this picture, does this one look like this one? And sometimes they'll say yes, and they'll have like a reasoning. And so sometimes the reasoning behind their circling makes sense, but it's still wrong.
I'm sorry, say that again. I was trying to.
And pre-reading assessments, some of the pre-reading assessments, I'm not sure what the thing is, but it's like they have a picture and they have to circle the picture that goes with it. And then as they learn it, then they learn to do letters. Then they have letters and then they circle the letters that are the same. And when they start to learn words, here's the word and they circle the word.
So some visual discrimination things.
I think that really comes out too in the benchmark assessments, those visual miscues. And I have noticed in kindergarten and often a lot of times in first grade, when we're on that carpet, they are not looking. They may be listening, but I think a lot of the kids aren't necessarily looking. And then even when they're reading, they might look at the first sound. But, it just takes so much prompting to get them to look. At least I found it. That happened a lot.
And that kind of develops later, but it is hard to keep your little attention span.
I remember when I had the young ones, one year I was really gung-ho about the developmental reading, the developmental spelling, the phonics, and some of the beginning things for the beginning kindergartners was simply getting magnetic letters on the board, a bunch of them mixed up, and just finding all the magnetic letters that were the same. And I'm like, oh, it was hard. And that, I guess, so many times those very basic skills are just overlooked because you think, oh, they'll be simple, but the teachers simply don't have time. They think they don't have time to go back and do some that are different.
Some of our letters look alike.
Yeah. I've seen things with like where teachers will put A's, like a bunch of A's, but they're all different fonts. And they have to
Oh,
Our curriculum uses that.
match them all or whatever.
Curriculum does that for level 1.
Yeah. It's true.
And it does, but they only use a couple letters at a time. I think they do 2 or 3 letters. And